Have you ever told yourself, let it go? It's not worth the fight. I'm better than this. And in that moment, maybe you believed it. Maybe you thought you were being mature, noble even, but deep down, something felt wrong. Not because you backed down, but because a part of you vanished when you did. That's not peace. That's self-erasure. Every time you swallow the truth just to keep the peace, you're not avoiding conflict. You're internalizing it. You're silencing yourself so someone else can feel comfortable. You're shrinking to fit inside someone else's version of harmony. And that's the lie we've been sold. That conflict is bad. That disagreement is immoral. That real strength is silence, submission, politeness. But Friedrich Nietzsche saw through that. He didn't romanticize peace. He diagnosed its shadow. He called it slave morality. The morality of the afraid. The quiet. The ones who couldn't afford to fight back. So they rewrote the rules, made weakness a virtue, made obedience a moral standard, made swallowing rage an act of spiritual greatness. And guess what? That morality lives inside you right now. Not because you're weak, but because you were raised in it. Since childhood, you were told not to talk back, not to question authority, not to stand up when someone crossed the line, because causing drama made you the problem. So you learned to avoid conflict. You got good at suppressing your instincts. You learned to nod, to smile, to tolerate things you hated. All for what? A false sense of peace that's killing your spirit. Because when you bury conflict, you don't eliminate it, you relocate it inside your own body. Nietzsche said, "He who cannot put his thoughts on ice should not enter into the heat of dispute." That's not a call for silence. It's a call for preparation, strength, clarity. Because conflict isn't the enemy. Fear is. Fear of rejection. Fear of losing love. Fear of being seen as difficult or dangerous. But here's the uncomfortable truth. If you constantly live to avoid conflict, you've already surrendered your freedom. You've handed your power to everyone who knows you're too afraid to push back. That tension you feel when someone disrespects you and you smile through it, that's not you being noble. That's you betraying yourself. You're not being the bigger person. You're being the more scared one. And Nietzsche hated that kind of self-sacrifice. He didn't glorify politeness. He glorified power, not domination, but self-mastery. The courage to say, no, that's enough. The courage to stop adjusting your boundaries just to keep others happy. Because here's what Nietzsche knew. A life without confrontation isn't peace, it's paralysis. You think you're avoiding chaos, but you're just internalizing it. You think you're keeping the peace, but you're destroying your self-respect. And that's the beginning of every resentment, every burnout, every breakdown. This isn't about turning every conversation into a fight. It's about being someone who doesn't flinch when a fight is necessary. Because the longer you run from conflict, the more it owns you. You've been taught to be agreeable, to stay calm, to be the person who keeps everything smooth and steady. But let's call it what it is. You weren't trained to be peaceful. You were trained to be submissive. You were taught to compromise who you are, just to avoid upsetting people who were never thinking about you in the first place. And here's the sick part. Society applauds you for it. They tell you you're mature, that you're wise for staying silent, that you've grown because you didn't punch back. But deep down, you feel it. The tension, the tightening in your chest, the voice in your head screaming what you really wanted to say. You didn't grow. You folded. And Nietzsche saw this submission for what it is. Poison. Not because kindness is weak, but because fake kindness is self-betrayal. Because silence isn't always golden. Sometimes it's cowardice, polished to look virtuous. He called it ressentiment, a French word for the rot that happens when people suppress their pain, their anger, their instincts. It doesn't go away. It just turns inward. It festers. It grows teeth. Ressentiment is the inner war you start when you're too afraid to fight on the outside. You convince yourself you're better because you don't respond, because you forgive, because you let it slide. But deep down, you're just afraid. Afraid to lose your place. Afraid to be alone. Afraid of how loud your own voice might sound if you actually used it. And what Nietzsche makes brutally clear is this: you cannot be free while you're still swallowing your truth. Every time you stay silent when you should speak up, you don't just lose the moment, you lose yourself. You chip away at your own identity until all that's left is a mask. A nice person, a polite person, a good person, but not a real person. Nietzsche knew submission isn't natural. It's trained, conditioned, enforced. It's the result of a culture built to reward obedience and punish independence. But here's the catch: the more you suppress yourself, the more power you hand to those who exploit your silence. And once they know you won't speak up, they stop pretending to care at all. Think about it. How many times have you said yes when you wanted to say no? How many times have you smiled through something that hurt? How many times have you swallowed disrespect like it was your job? That's not maturity. That's a slow form of emotional suicide. And you know what it breeds? Resentment, bitterness, quiet rage, not at them, but at yourself. Because you knew, you always knew. You just didn't act. That's what Nietzsche wanted to kill. Not your decency, not your compassion, but your compulsion to stay small. He didn't want you to become a monster. He wanted you to stop pretending to be a martyr, because playing the victim isn't noble. It's just another way to avoid responsibility. It lets you stay silent, compliant, above the fight, while your soul corrodes from the inside out. And here's the brutal truth Nietzsche throws in your face. If you refuse to confront what violates you, you are complicit in your own oppression. Not by accident, by choice. But there's another choice too. The choice to stop submitting. The choice to stop playing small to keep everyone else comfortable. The choice to confront, not to destroy, but to reclaim the space that was always yours. And that's where the journey turns, because Nietzsche didn't stop at diagnosis. He showed us the cure. It's called the will to power. And in the next chapter, you'll see how reclaiming that force isn't about domination. It's about remembering who the hell you are and refusing to apologize for it. Most people hear the words will to power and instantly think of tyrants, control freaks, people obsessed with dominance. They couldn't be more wrong. Friedrich Nietzsche wasn't telling you to conquer others. He was telling you to stop being conquered. The will to power isn't about stepping on people. It's about standing up, finally, fully, and without asking for permission. It's not about controlling the world. It's about refusing to let the world control you. Because what's really been holding you back isn't injustice. It's your refusal to act. You've been handed a story since birth. That strength is dangerous, that ambition is selfish, that asserting yourself is aggressive. And so you've played small. You've quieted your instincts. You've made yourself nice. But Nietzsche knew, when you suppress your will, you don't become good. You become sick. That force inside you doesn't die. It mutates into anxiety, into depression, into bitterness that eats at you from within. You wonder why you feel stuck, why you feel numb. It's not because you're broken. It's because you buried your power alive. That's what the will to power is. The natural urge of all life to expand, to push through limits, to grow beyond what came before. A seed doesn't apologize for becoming a tree. A lion doesn't apologize for roaring. But you apologize just for wanting more. More respect, more space, more truth. You've been taught that wanting those things is selfish, but Nietzsche flips that lie on its head. The real sickness isn't selfishness, it's self-erasure. It's choosing comfort over clarity. It's sitting in silence while your life shrinks. It's convincing yourself that not being seen is safer than being misunderstood. And that lie has a cost. Your future. Because nothing changes until you change. No one gives you power. You take it back. Not by force, not by violence, but by declaring with your actions, your choices, your energy, I exist. I matter. I will not shrink. That's the will to power. And here's where most people get it twisted. They think power means having control over others. No, the real flex, having control over yourself. Power is being able to walk away from what insults your soul. Power is saying no without guilt. Power is refusing to explain your boundaries just to make someone else feel comfortable, because you don't owe anyone comfort at the cost of your integrity. Nietzsche's will to power is not a tool, it's a transformation. It's what happens when you stop editing yourself for the sake of peace. When you stop negotiating with people who profit from your silence. It's not about becoming cruel, it's about becoming whole. You stop looking for approval. You stop seeking validation. You stop performing, and you start living with a spine, not a script. And guess what? It will make people uncomfortable. Good. Because if your truth shakes their comfort, maybe their comfort was built on your silence. The will to power is the antidote to submission, the cure to ressentiment, the force that pulls you out of survival mode and into creation mode. It's not about reacting. It's about responding with direction. It's not about destroying others. It's about refusing to destroy yourself any longer. But this shift won't happen by accident. You won't stumble into your power. You have to choose it consciously, deliberately, repeatedly. And when you do, something wild happens. You stop fearing conflict, not because it disappears, but because it no longer defines you. You don't run from hard conversations. You walk straight into them because you know who you are now. And you're done negotiating your worth. In the next chapter, we'll break down one of Nietzsche's most powerful ideas, the metamorphosis of the spirit, the journey from the obedient camel to the rebellious lion to the free creating child. But for now, remember this. Your will is not a flaw. Your voice is not too much. Your presence is not a threat. It's a revolution. And it starts the moment you stop apologizing for being alive. Nietzsche didn't just critique the sickness of society. He gave us a cure. And he did it through one of his most profound metaphors, the 3 metamorphoses of the spirit. This isn't some abstract riddle. It's a blueprint, a roadmap for breaking free from fear, conformity, and silence, and becoming someone who no longer needs to flinch at conflict because they've built themselves from fire. The journey has 3 stages: the camel, the lion, the child. Let's start with the camel. You were born into a world that handed you burdens. Be polite. Don't make trouble. Respect authority. Swallow your anger. Be the bigger person. You didn't choose these weights. You were trained to carry them. And you learned to wear your suffering like a badge. You told yourself that enduring pain made you strong, that being silent made you noble, that avoiding conflict was maturity. But Nietzsche cuts through that illusion. The camel isn't strong. The camel is obedient. It takes pride in submission, in carrying what others drop on its back, in walking through the desert of life without ever asking, "Is this even my path?" That's where most people stay forever. But for those who begin to feel the burden cracking their spine, Nietzsche says, something awakens, something revolts. The spirit refuses to carry anymore, and it becomes a lion. The lion doesn't exist to please. The lion isn't here to be liked. The lion doesn't beg for space, it takes it. This stage is all about saying no. No to false morality. No to inherited roles. No to being a footnote in someone else's story. It's messy. It's uncomfortable. But it's necessary. Because if you can't say no, your yes means nothing. But here's the twist. The lion is powerful, but still reactive, still fighting old battles, still stuck in opposition. And Nietzsche says even this phase isn't the end. There's a third transformation, the most powerful one of all. The spirit becomes a child, and not the child society tries to mold. This child isn't naive, it isn't innocent, it's not soft. This child is free. Free to create, free to choose, free to live by values it wasn't handed, but built from its own experience. The lion learns to reject. The child learns to invent. This is the final level of freedom. When you become the child, you no longer just react to what others say or do. You don't live to destroy their rules. You live to create your own. You stop asking, "Is this allowed?" and start asking, "Is this me?" You no longer need conflict to prove your strength, because now everything you do, how you speak, how you move, how you exist, becomes proof. This is what most people never understand about Nietzsche. He wasn't glorifying anger or rebellion for its own sake. He was describing the inner evolution of a person who's done carrying other people's lies. He was laying out the stages of someone who first survives, then resists, and finally rebuilds. So ask yourself, are you still the camel? Living for others, carrying shame that isn't yours, measuring your worth by how much you can endure. Are you becoming the lion, drawing boundaries, cutting off what drains you, finally learning that no is a full sentence? Or are you stepping into the child? That quiet, sovereign place where you no longer need to react because you've become the creator of your own life. There's no judgment about where you are, but there is a question. Are you moving? Because Nietzsche didn't write for people who wanted to stay the same. He wrote for those who are ready to transform. In the next chapter, we go deeper. Nietzsche's final challenge. Become who you are, not who you were told to be, not who you're expected to be, but the person hidden beneath all the conditioning. That's where we're going next. But for now, remember this. Transformation is not about becoming something new. It's about shedding everything that never belonged to you in the first place. Become who you are. That's it. That's Nietzsche's challenge. Not find your passion, not be yourself. Become. Because who you really are isn't sitting there waiting to be discovered like some buried treasure. It's something you have to build, something you have to fight for, but most never do. Why? Because being who you are requires confrontation. And not just with the world, with your family's expectations, with your culture's definition of success, with your own habits of hiding, pleasing, conforming. It means staring into the eyes of everything that says, don't stand out, don't speak up, don't break the pattern, and saying no. Becoming who you are is war, not with others, but with the part of you that settled. The part of you that made peace with a life that never fit. Think about it. How many choices have you made to be accepted? How many times have you said yes to be loved, to be safe, to be praised, even when everything inside you screamed no? How many of your values are really yours? How many are hand-me-downs you never questioned? This is what Nietzsche saw with ruthless clarity. The biggest threat to your freedom isn't oppression from outside. It's obedience from within. Obedience to comfort, to fear, to the voice that says, if you just keep your head down, maybe things will be okay. But okay isn't a life. It's a slow death. That's why becoming who you are means burning the mask. It means speaking the truth even when your voice shakes. It means walking away even when you have nowhere to go yet. It means holding your ground even when you're standing alone. Because who you are is what's left when you stop pretending. Nietzsche never promised it would be easy. He didn't offer comfort, he offered fire. He wrote for the rare few willing to tear down the lies they live inside of. The few who understand that peace without authenticity isn't peace, it's a prison. And that's why conflict matters. Not because you should fight everyone, but because without conflict, there's no creation. You can't create your true life without destroying the false one. You can't discover your voice if you never say what others won't like. You can't become who you are by avoiding discomfort. The real battle is always within. Between your potential and your programming. Between your courage and your conditioning. Between the truth of your spirit and the role you were cast to play. That's the arena Nietzsche invites you into. And it's terrifying, because becoming who you are means losing everything that isn't aligned with your truth. It means outgrowing relationships, redefining success, risking misunderstanding, risking loneliness. But what you gain yourself. Fully, finally, fiercely. You gain a life that fits your soul, not your image. You gain a kind of strength that doesn't need applause, approval, or permission, because you're not living to be understood. You're living to be real. That's why Nietzsche's message cuts so deep, because it doesn't ask, what do you want? It asks, what are you willing to let go of to become it? So ask yourself, who would you be if you weren't afraid of losing anything? What would you say if you stopped trying to be liked? What would you build if you stopped asking for permission? That person, that life, is waiting. Not out there, inside you, under the noise, under the fear, under the silence you've been taught to keep. It's time to dig. It's time to break. It's time to choose yourself, loudly, unapologetically, dangerously. Because the most powerful thing you can ever do is become the one thing the world isn't ready for. Someone who is finally, truly, completely themselves. That's the final conflict. That's the final freedom. And it begins the moment you stop asking, who should I be, and start declaring, this is who I am. Every time you choose silence over truth, you pay. You think you're buying peace. What you're really buying is regret. Because silence, when it's fear-driven, isn't protection. It's permission. Permission for others to cross your boundaries. Permission for abuse to repeat itself. Permission for lies to stand unchallenged. You tell yourself it's not worth it. But let's be honest, what exactly are you protecting? Your image, your comfort, your illusion of harmony? Because deep down you feel it, that twist in your gut, that weight on your chest, that voice whispering, you should have said something. That's the real cost. Not the conflict you avoided, the truth you buried. Nietzsche didn't write about silence as a virtue. He wrote about it as complicity. And make no mistake, when you remain silent in the face of abuse, manipulation, or injustice, you are not neutral. You are feeding the very thing that keeps you small. And here's the thing the world won't tell you. Silence is never silent. It communicates. It tells the world you'll tolerate being disrespected. It tells manipulators you're an easy target. It tells your subconscious that your truth isn't worth defending. And over time, this message doesn't just echo, it becomes your reality. You start to believe it. You start to live it. You become it. That's how submission becomes a personality. Not because it's who you are, but because it's what you've repeated. And the worst part? You call it kindness. You call it maturity. You call it choosing your battles. But Nietzsche would call it what it really is, cowardice dressed as virtue. Now hear this. There's a difference between stillness and suppression. Stillness is power. Suppression is decay. Stillness is chosen. Suppression is inherited. Stillness comes from strength. Suppression comes from fear. When you suppress your voice enough times, it doesn't just disappear. It festers. It turns into bitterness, into resentment, into a silent scream that no one hears, because you trained the world not to listen. And here's the kicker. The world always believes the role you play. If you act like your needs don't matter, they won't matter. If you act like your voice doesn't count, it won't count. If you act like your boundaries don't exist, they'll be erased. Every time you remain silent to keep the peace, remember this. You're not keeping peace. You're keeping the problem alive. Nietzsche saw this in all its ugliness. He didn't sugarcoat it. He didn't offer soft advice. He offered truth. Raw, uncomfortable, liberating. He knew that silence isn't just a personal choice. It's a social signal. And when that signal says, I will tolerate this, someone will take you up on it. That's why you have to change your response. Not for revenge. Not to prove anything, but to reclaim your place in the world as someone who exists with dignity. So what's the alternative? You speak, you draw the line, you walk away when it's crossed. Not every fight needs your energy, but some fights are the proof that you have energy left to fight for yourself. And if you don't, you start to disappear, one unspoken truth at a time, one compromise at a time, until all that's left is a shell that once dreamed of being whole. But that's not your fate, unless you make it one. So stop choosing silence that makes you small. Start choosing silence that makes you sovereign. The kind that comes after you've spoken the truth. After you've made yourself clear. After you've stopped apologizing for needing space, for drawing a line, for existing with depth and power. Because the truth is this: peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the presence of integrity. And integrity demands a voice. Your voice. So next time you want to keep the peace, ask yourself, whose peace is this really protecting? Yours or theirs? Because if your peace comes at the cost of your identity, it's not peace, it's just silence. And silence isn't golden when it buries the truth. It's time to stop betraying yourself. Speak. Even if your voice shakes. Confront. Even if it's uncomfortable. Live. Even if it breaks their expectations. You don't need permission to be real. You just need the courage to stop disappearing. Because the world doesn't need another quiet, compliant, agreeable version of you. It needs you, unfiltered, unapologetic, unmistakably alive. If this video challenged you, moved you, or sparked something inside you, don't let it stop here. Hit that like button to let us know it spoke to you. Comment below with your thoughts or the moment that hit hardest. We read everyone. Share this with someone who's been silencing themselves for too long. And if you want more bold truths that cut through the noise, subscribe and turn on notifications. We're building a community that's done playing small. Your voice matters. Your presence matters. And this is just the beginning.